On April the 27th, Pope John Paul II was canonized. And so too in the minds of many were his teachings elevated to a particularly lofty status among the writings of all the popes. Well, today with that in mind, I'd like to take a closer look at some of Pope John Paul II's writings on that very important topic of ecumenism. Now, my purpose in this video isn't so much to speak to the traditional-minded Catholics out there, but more so to those who might consider themselves more properly conservative. Those of you who hear the ecumenical tone of our churchmen today and sense that something isn't quite right. I want to speak directly to those of you who perhaps realize that there is some sort of disconnect somewhere, but you just can't seem to put your finger on what it is. Now, for my more traditional viewers, I'd like to ask that you please consider passing this video along to such persons on my behalf. In his landmark treatment on ecumenism, Ut Unum Sint, Pope John Paul II set forth the following proposition, quote, "By God's grace, neither what belongs to the structure of the Church of Christ, nor that communion which still exists with the other churches and ecclesial communities has been destroyed." End quote. For those unaware, other churches is a reference to the schismatic Orthodox churches, the Russian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox. Ecclesial communities refers to the many thousands of Protestant communities from the First Avenue Bible Fellowship in Anywhere Town, USA, to the Church of England, and everyone in between. Now, know very well what Pope John Paul II is saying here. He's telling us that among these many thousands of communities, communion still exists with the Church of Christ and themselves. And what is the Church of Christ? Well, as the perennial teaching of the popes throughout the centuries most certainly attests, it is, of course, the Holy Catholic Church. And so the question one might ask is simply this: do the thousands upon thousands of heretical communities that dot the landscape, the same that deny the Most Holy Eucharist, deny the holy sacrifice of the Mass and the priesthood, deny the Pope and the Blessed Virgin Mary, and on the denials go, do they really have communion with the Catholic Church? Is it there, but only in some degree? Or are these communities outside Catholic communion? Well, Pope John Paul II said that communion still exists. And this is why our churchmen today so often speak to and speak about Protestants as if there's no need whatsoever for them to renounce their heresy and return to the one true Church of Christ. And indeed, if communion does still exist with the one true Church of Christ, well, if that communion's there with the solitary means of salvation, what's to be gained by insisting that the return to Rome should take place, other than perhaps to create a little bit of animosity? Now at this, we have to consider what previous popes had to say on the matter. Pope Leo XIII, for example, taught very clearly, quote, "The practice of the Church has always been the same, as is shown by the unanimous teaching of the Fathers, who were wont to hold as outside Catholic communion and alien to the Church whoever would recede in the least degree from any point of doctrine proposed by her authoritative magisterium." End quote. Now, this is very important. Notice that Pope Leo is appealing to two things. Number one, he tells us that the doctrine that he is setting forth here, quote, has always been the same. In other words, it's the constant witness of the Catholic Church. Secondly, he appeals to nothing less authoritative than the unanimous teaching of the Fathers of the Church. Now this, my friends, is the very essence of the Church's definitive teachings. In other words, the immutable dogmas of the Holy Catholic faith. Now, pay close attention to the dogma that Pope Leo XIII is repeating here after the manner of those who came before him. He said that those who recede in the least degree from any point of Catholic doctrine are indeed outside Catholic communion. The Holy Father even goes so far as to say that they are alien to the church. Now look, one need not even be a Catholic to see the obvious here. And it's not a pretty picture. Pope John Paul II, in Ut Unum Sint, soundly rejected this dogma of the Holy Catholic faith when he said, quote, "Communion still exists with the Church of Christ and the other churches and ecclesial communities." So what are we to make of all of this? Well, look, it isn't very complicated at all. In his rejection of the dogma of the Catholic faith regarding communion with the church among the heretics, John Paul II very clearly is guilty of material heresy. In other words, the material that he plainly taught is a departure from that which the church has always taught. It is, in fact, heretical. Now, does that make him a formal heretic, a person who knowingly rejected the immutable faith of the Catholic Church? Well, this is something that we can't say. In truth, for the purposes of this present discussion, it doesn't really matter. What does matter, however, for us, is coming to terms, in spite of how painful doing so might be, with the simple and plain fact that our churchmen, as evidenced by their ecumenical tone today, have come to fully accept the heresy that was put forth by John Paul II, the one that maintains that the heretics still enjoy communion with the Catholic Church. And yet, as the unanimous teaching of the fathers of the Church most certainly attests, they do not. In behaving and speaking as if they do, countless souls have been relegated to dying without the sacraments. God help us. So what now? Well, my advice? Delve deeply into the faith of the Church as it was taught with clarity and precision by the preconciliar popes. Become intimately familiar with it so you too can spot these terrible offenses against our blessed Lord whenever and wherever they may happen to occur, so that you might stand on the solid ground of sure doctrine and might even perhaps be afforded an opportunity to help others do the same. I'm Louie Verrecchio.